We're building a biotech city on a Caribbean island in a special economic zone.
How did you get into this thing and why?
It's probably the most crypto-friendly jurisdiction in the world. There is, I think, 11 different cryptos that are accepted as legal tender. I pay my car rentals in crypto. I pay for my apartment in crypto.
This looks really like a movie scenario. You already have biotech installed. Suddenly, Brian Johnson is flying over to your place. Can you tell us a story about that?
We think we can develop a new approach here to health regulation to bring new drugs and therapies and biotechnologies to market much faster than we could anywhere else.
Niklas Anzinger, welcome to this interview. I thank you very much for taking the time. It's late for you, but I appreciate the fact that you are jumping on this call and sharing some ideas. We are going to talk today about something that is completely new for the world, and it's called Vitalia City. Thanks for joining, my man.
Fantastic to be here, John. Really looking forward to this.
So can you tell us what is this project, Vitalia? It seems to be completely movie stuff, like, you know, those futuristic projects that you see only in movies. Can you detail us and give us some feedback on what it is, where it's located, and what's the purpose of that?
Sure. So the short version is we're building a biotech city on a Caribbean island in a special economic zone. So this is
That's a very short version. Yeah, everyone can do that. What is behind that thing?
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of history leading up to it and why it's here and why it's possible and what even is Roatan. And the main reason for that is that we think we can develop a new approach here to health regulation that would allow us to bring new drugs and therapies and biotechnologies to market much faster than we could anywhere else. And we can develop a worldwide standard for it that can really help the world to bring life-saving technology to people.
Do you mean that Vitalia is some sort of out of countries, completely independent form of a state or a country by itself? Like, would a passport, Vitalia passport, exist one day? And this is only because you want to bring technologies into that place that are stopped by regulation and all these constraints that we have in our society today, correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me talk a bit about what's the seen. So how does it actually look like and what is it? And then the unseen. What kind of makes it possible? What ideas and especially like the legal system? So we're on an island called Roatan. Roatan is part of the country of Honduras. It is not like the mainland, it is safe, right? So if it was a US state, Roatan would be the fourth safest US state. The island of Roatan is about the size of Hong Kong, and it has 100,000 inhabitants. So it's not an isolated island. And we're located in a special economic zone that's called Prospera Zede, SEDE, which is a special economic zone. And the land size of the zone is about 1,000 acres, so it's about the size of 2 Monacos. So it's a small territory. It's a community on the island with about between 50 to 100 regular full-time residents. We often have visitors and have like hundreds of people here. We had the Vitalia pop-up city with more than 500 people. There's a clinic, the Garm Clinic, which is offering some of the advanced theme therapies that would have been developed here. One by Minicircle, for example, which has made the news because Brian Johnson tested it here. There's another company called Symbiont Labs where you can get cybernetic implants. And their goal is to develop them to medical grade use. There's another company which just recently got approved with a new gene therapy, like a VEGF gene therapy. And the scientists took an existing product that is approved in Russia, right? So much of the safety testing and trialing has already been done. And then in the jurisdiction within Prospera, there is sort of one new futuristic development on a greenfield site where you have things like a robotic factory where you have robots producing building materials. The cybernetics lab is also there. There's a co-working space. Now there is a Duna tower with 14 stories here where most of the residents are living, including myself. That's what I'm calling from right now. There is a drone landing platform on top of this tower.
Like, welcome to the future.
Exactly. My friend Eli Dorado has once called it snow crash in the tropics. And adjacent to that, about a 10 minutes walk along the beach or by car, there is a resort. So Prospera bought this resort ready-made. So there's about 100 villas on there. There is a hotel that has about 600 rooms. It has about 60 rooms, not 600. But they're more luxurious and spacious. There's also a beach club with pool and private beach and sort of amenities that you can expect in a developed country or in a place like Florida, right? So that is kind of what you see here, right? And then Vitalia is people, it's a community, it's a team, and we're aiming to build a biotech district here. We want to develop real estate, right? So both residential and commercial. We're planning to build a biotech lab because right now you can deliver many of the therapies through the Garm clinic, but it's harder to do lab research, right? So there is not that much lab research equipment that's there. So it's early stage in many ways. And then there is the part that's unseen. That's kind of the regulatory, the legal side. So for background, when you hear special economic zone, think of Dubai,
right?
Or think of Hong Kong. These were special administrative regions that are basically developing a different set of laws from the host country they're in, which is very normal. There's more than 5,000 special economic zones all over the world. China has successfully used special economic zones for their economic development. They're in fact a hidden variable that's not often talked about. And it's simply because it's easier to build something new in an unpopulated area than to reform the entire country with like millions of people. Correct. So that's why special economic zones exist. They exist in Panama, they exist in Costa Rica, in Uruguay. Honduras had special economic zones before these special economic zones. So the Zede is really a modernized version of Honduran special economic zones that grant a very high degree of legal autonomy.
But you still depend of the country of Honduras, correct?
Exactly.
Right.
So the Zedes are a subdivision of the Honduran state.
Okay.
So they're under the Honduran constitution.
Okay.
You can think of them a bit like a municipality, right? So Honduras has 272 municipalities. And the Zedes are effectively one municipality like that. And what is different there is that we can do our own legal system in areas such as business and commercial, labor, taxes, right? I'm a tax resident here in Prospera. I can incorporate a company here. The limitations are criminal law and immigration law. So Honduran criminal law applies here, and Honduran immigration law applies here.
What kind of immigration laws? Like, can you come from many countries and be a resident of Vitalia?
Yeah, so you can become a resident of Honduras, then you can become a resident in Prospera.
Okay.
Right, so these are jurisdictional administrative entities. Vitalia is not. Right, okay. So Vitalia is a community within Prospera. Right, so in crypto language, we sometimes call it a layer 2. Prospera is a layer 1 that provides sort of a degree of autonomy, of legal autonomy, and then Vitalia builds on top of that. We're bringing an industry, in this case biotech and health, kind of as apps that build on top of that layer 1.
Okay. One question that pops up into my mind is like Honduras has certain restrictions for certain countries or not at all?
So it has some restrictions where you need to like get visas, for example, India or China, some very big countries.
Okay.
For many other countries, including myself from Germany or from the United States, it's easy to come here. And it's also very easy to get visas on arrivals that typically last for 90 days. So it's very easy to visit. If you want to live here permanently, you need to become a Honduran resident, and then you can be a Prospera resident, including a tax resident, right? And that process is not that hard, right? Before Prospera, or generally, Honduras rather has a problem with people leaving rather than people immigrating to Honduras.
Yes, that's it. It's true. Yeah. And tax. So
Yeah.
you said like you can set up Prospera as his own tax system and everything. So is it? I believe since it's a economic zone for development, tax-wise, you are encouraging people to make investment there, and there is no taxes,
There's low taxes,
low
right?
tax.
So there is a 5% income tax. There's a 1% tax on business revenue. There's no capital gains tax. There's a land tax of 1%, and there's a sales tax of 2.5%. And it's
Sales
all
tax is
territorial.
over, well, international sales tax, not local.
It's on goods and services sold within the zone, right?
Right.
So it's not extraterritorial, right? So if you have a shop here, a business that sells widgets or sends like MacBooks or something like that, you pay 2.5% sales tax compared to 15% on the rest
Okay.
of the island.
But let's
All right.
pretend you produce exosome and stuff like that, and you export them to another country. You're not paying any taxes there.
So I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, about that question. I'd have to
Okay.
ask an expert. So the zones were designed to make export and import easier,
Okay.
right? So Prospera is supposed to have their own customs agents, right, to save on a lot of import duties, and I'm
Right.
assuming also export, but I don't know for sure. However, there's been challenges with the current political administration in Honduras. So, right, they withdrew or failed to meet their obligation to send a customs agent. So, in practice, right now, it's not as easy. Import and export is something that we aim to solve with the next political administration. There have been very good signs of progress. Like 2.5 years ago, when the new administration came to power, things didn't look that good from the outside. But now we're making a lot of progress, so we can get like the import and export restrictions lifted and make that significantly easier too.
Okay. Now I understand the concept of Prospera and the dependence on Honduras and then Vitalia going on layer three almost from Honduras. You are in like you are more or less and correct me if I'm wrong, but in a way or the other linked with the crypto world. Are you thinking out loud that the money of Vitalia or Prospera will one day become decentralized as it is for the technologies and run on cryptocurrencies instead of running off, or maybe something like similar to cryptocurrencies or the next generation, uh, like the technologies that you're bringing in today, and not depend on any monetary system that are in the world
Yeah.
as established.
Yeah, so crypto is very much part of the ethos of Prosper and of Vitalia. Vitalia got started during Zuzalu, which was a pop-up city started by Vitalik Buterin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum.
Okay.
Right, so we were very explicitly influenced by that, and a lot of our community is coming from the Ethereum ecosystem and have experience with like decentralized science and some of the bio DAOs, for example. And then Prospera, it has a very liberty-focused ethos, which aligns with cryptocurrency. So crypto is very widely used here. It's been the first jurisdiction that adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, even before El Salvador. It's probably the most crypto-friendly jurisdiction in the world. There is, I think, 11 different cryptos that are accepted as legal tender, meaning you can pay your taxes in crypto. In fact, I do regularly pay my taxes in Prospera in crypto. Right,
Wow.
there's even something like Prospera tax credits, so I can get like discounts on taxes if I pay earlier, and these are a Solana-based token. I also pay my car rentals in crypto. I pay for my apartment in crypto. Like I own my
Wow.
apartment, and in fact, I took out a loan through Aave, which is a permissionless lending protocol for crypto. Right, I will collateralize my crypto and I borrow stablecoins against it. And so I was self-mortgaging myself through crypto. That's how I bought my apartment here.
Wow. Interesting. So you're aiming to be completely independent from whatever is happening across the planet, I guess.
I would not say that, right?
Okay.
So Prosper does not have the intention to be isolated or to be like in any way or form like self-sustainable, right? Of course, we want to hold leverage and not be too influenced by others, especially when it comes to things like, banking regulations and things like that. but Prospera always says they're doing sort of the most advanced yet acceptable, right? So we're following KYC, we're following AML regulations, right? So residents here have like identity verification, and we look for criminal records and things like that. And also when it comes to how the regulatory system is designed, it's designed in a way that we can go and do business with other jurisdictions, with other countries, and are saying, hey, this is something that is within your existing norms. This is something that
Right.
should be acceptable to you. This is not something we want to keep just doing here. We in fact want to tell the world, hey, these things we can do here and prove to you that they work. And when they work, we can show them to you because you could do the same thing.
That's beautiful. I've read, and you are definitely going to correct this information that has been circulating on the web. Vitalia was the dream of some billionaires created for like keeping them busy. Looking at what you're doing, I don't think it's the truth. But why was that vehiculated on the media?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a story that sells, right? These billionaires that want to live forever, right? So we
Yeah.
know that in the longevity world as well, where the actual reality is that billionaires spend only like a very, very small fraction of their wealth on longevity, right? So the reality is that's just not the case. And it's actually very similar here, right? So Prospera is a humble startup. It was very hard for them to raise the money that they've raised so far, which is about between 120 and 150 million. And I know almost all the investors. The billionaires aren't among them that everyone is talking about, right? So Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, and Tim Ferriss, they invested in a fund which has a small stake in Prospera. So they're indirect investors, and it's even like a small investment. But everyone makes that into a big story, right?
Yeah.
Same with Vitalia, right? Vitalia started with a pre-seed round of 1 million that we raised.
Yeah.
Right. So we have nothing against that. In fact, I think it's a good idea, and billionaires should support this. Like, what else should be more worthwhile supporting than longevity, right? And also, these things, have an impact or make drugs and therapies more accessible for everyone on the planet, right? But you got to start somewhere.
Right.
And the people who are best able to fund sort of risky, unproven, or new things are people with a lot of wealth. So we have nothing against that. And in fact, in the future, we're now seeing more engagement actually from people with bigger names and deep pockets, and we're welcoming that. So in a way, we might make the media stories true, but so far they aren't actually.
Yeah. Funny enough, I think that you're still raising money. Huh? You're on the second round.
Yeah, raising a seed round, we're almost close, or we
Oh,
expect to
oh,
close
oh.
within the next 1 or 2 weeks and getting some final
Oh,
commitments in.
okay. Yeah, I was approached on that one. They were telling me, like, but there was approach like maybe a month ago. I got the information. This is probably when we connected to.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, your role, your dream on Vitalia, before we step into talking about Brian Johnson paying you a visit, but how did you get into this thing and why?
I haven't told that story really many people, but I think like many entrepreneurs, we're very inspired by science fiction, right? So we're thinking of like building cities on the sea or underwater. So that I think is something that influenced me early on. In fact, in my high school yearbook, I wrote that one day I want to build like a utopian city. Right. So it and then I had a career as first I started as a researcher in like economics. I was thinking about sort of these how society is impacted by many of these rules and these incentives we set up. And then I started a career as a startup entrepreneur. I was kind of in B2B SaaS and AI, right? So that was kind of the confinement of where we could channel these big ambitions to. And we've seen a lot of innovation in the digital world as a result, which is great. But I always found that my sort of deeper seated visions of the future, I didn't see kind of a realistic possibility until I saw Prospera, right? So I was already thinking about how you could make bigger changes like in the healthcare system, right? The current sick care system and how it works, right? So during COVID, I think I had many epiphanies and I went deep down a rabbit hole trying to understand why we are able to produce a vaccine against a deadly pandemic in one weekend on a computer, just based on the genome sequence, in January 2020, before the pandemic even starts, and then don't roll it out at scale, or why we're still using like these massively expensive, complex clinical trials where we could achieve the same efficiency with 100 times fewer patients if we did human challenge trials. Right? So these are kind of questions around like ethics and economics and efficiency that I was thinking about. But how can you do anything about that, right? As an entrepreneur, you can't change the laws, and the system is really encoded, it's really hard coded, right? So you'd have to lobby for human challenge trials. And there are groups in the UK who are making progress with that, which is great. But that's too slow, right? We already have the technology available to save people's lives.
True.
So why are we not moving faster? And then when I came here, it dawned on me, hey, this is the way. And once I learned about Prospera's legal system, and we can go into this at any depth you want, I think they've achieved really the 0 to 1 in that space, right? They have been thinking about what went right and what went wrong with the history of 250 years of the US Constitution, which was a tremendous innovation at the time, with the past several hundreds of years of British common law, which is something that made Singapore, Dubai successful, right? So it's a very business-friendly way of doing laws, a much more bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. So they've been thinking really hard how to do the best possible version of that for the 21st century in an industry that hasn't innovated in hundreds of years. How would an economist design a perfect tax system that's like very simple and cheap to administer and leads to effective tax collection, things like that? So that's when I realized, okay, we can solve these big challenges, right? There is a way to do it.
And you moved there.
Yeah, first I read about it in a blog post by Scott Alexander, a very famous Bay Area blogger. It's called Prospectus on Prospera, which is from 2021, but it's to this date very, very accurate. And I did not expect that that would happen to me, but I was just visiting. I was like, I gotta check this out. And then when I was there, my visit exceeded even my wildest expectations, right? So not only like the location and what you can see and how much is already there, but also the quality of the team and the community behind it. These were people, Americans, Hondurans. The CEO of Prospera is from Venezuela, one of the co-founders from Guatemala. And they have been working on this project for more than 10 years. Right, some of the Honduran reformers have been working on this since early 2009. Right, so they have, and it was really a small group of people with very high conviction from Honduras who were saying, hey, this is something that could get our country out of poverty. And they were the ones, they were the giants whose shoulders we're standing on now. So after that visit, my takeaway was, and that coincided with the time when the government changed. So a lot of people thought, this wouldn't exist anymore in the future.
Right.
But I was like, hey, this might not work out, but I'm taking a bet on this. Because if this worked, this is going to make world history. And for the past 2.5 years, we've really made lots of progress and put Prospera on the map. And with Vitalia, really found a use case, like a major industry that is producing something that the world needs.
I agree, 100%. At this time, you know what? A year ago, I had no idea that you guys existed there. I had no idea what was happening there. When I first discovered Vitalia, and I was just like, this looks really like a movie scenario, and it's super interesting. And I remember the first talk we had, I told you, you remind me the book Utopian and the world of Utopian, and then you just say that too. So at the end of the day, it's not actually utopia by any means. It's the contrary of that. You're making reality, and proof of concept is like you already have biotech installed and set up in this place, and then suddenly we learn that Brian Johnson is flying over to your place to get some things done on his blood. And how did you get Brian to fly over? How did you manage that? Why? How did he know that Vitalia exists? What was the vector of communication, and why? Because I believe that he was chosen. It was not like out of the blue. It was strategic in the process of what you were doing. So can you tell us the story about that?
Yeah. So the credit here is entirely due to MiniCircle, right? So MiniCircle is a company that makes follistatin gene therapy, founded by Mac Davis and Walter Patterson. And these come from the biohacking space. They did self-experimentation. They, for a long time, ran against a lot of obstacles in the United States and were looking for a place where they'd have a more like-minded community that is allowing them to grow, that doesn't force them through a 10-year tour of duty, tour of bureaucracy, even though they're doing much of that as well. They're submitting their data to FDA approval as well and following many of the same regulations. But they were really the trailblazers. When I came here in 2022 to Prospera, they were already there, and they were in the process of doing a clinical trial with the local GARM clinic. So also big kudos to them. So they have done work, again, over a couple of years in showing, hey, we can do it. We can produce a drug here that is proven safe. And we can bring people here to show you that it's effective, continue efficacy trials and collecting data, and to show there is a way to do this faster on and with consenting adults and within a legal system that has boundaries. Right, so there's boundaries such as common law, like you can't fraud anyone or whatever is a crime anywhere in the world is probably also a crime here, but with like protocols around informed consent and things like that. And MiniCircle, due to that story, has been successful also with investors. They got investment. They actually got investment from Teal Capital and from Sim Altman and from Naval Ravikant. And then within these circles, their success of the clinical trial in Prospera was reaching Brian Johnson eventually. So then he was intrigued to come here.
Yeah. So he came once and then he came back with the father.
Exactly.
Correct? Yeah.
At the Vitalia pop-up city.
I love it. Yeah. It's interesting because, Brian Johnson has been doing a great job for the biohacking community. If you look at biohacking 3 years ago, with all due respect for Dave Asprey and all these guys, but it was a cultish movement where people were just like considered as like cuckoo people making tests on themselves. Brian just like worked hard for 2 years and showed the world that biohacking is actually something that is optimizing our lives and outside of the border of regulation, because what he's done has been just edgy in terms of regulation, and he was the guinea pig doing it. So he changed the perception of biohacking today. And do you think that Vitalia, you said when you introduced Vitalia, you said it's a biotech pole or city. The perception I have is more a biohacking city.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of biohacking going on, right? So we have quantified cells, we do trials on ourselves, especially during the pop-up city. And also a big part of what MiniCircle and other companies are doing is that we want to continually find more decentralized ways to do efficacy trials. So we're definitely very, very inspired by that and sort of by the ethos of self-experimentation. So that is a lot of what's going on. However, we also think that or the main focus that we have is to bring companies here. So we think we want to scale the impact we have through companies that develop therapies and drugs here, right? So, and it's part of our culture and our ecosystem and I think a very, very important part of also proving that these things work, to use biohacking and self-experimentation. So yeah, there's a very big place for that.
How do you run the clinical trials that are in Vitalia or Prospera in general? Like, because in the United States, for example, you recruit people and they live in the country. Isn't that a challenge for the location of Vitalia?
Yeah, not so much.
No?
Safety trials we can pretty much do in the same way as the FDA or the WHO. The problem with safety trials is not so much rules around safety. These are fine. It's more the bureaucratic administration thereof, right? So it takes a couple of months to get like a meeting with the FDA, and it costs 20,000. And to submit an IND, which is basically you submitting the existing animals and human studies, costs 150,000. And then it might still say no, and it takes a couple of months. So it's really that bureaucratic administration that poses the biggest barrier, right? So in the simplest form, you can just say, okay, you're dealing with a customer-friendly startup as opposed to a big monolithic organization. So around safety trials and IND studies like that, we can pretty much do it the same way. Also, we keep saying to people, I think what's also a bit wrong with the existing system of biotech is we look too much at the new stuff, right? So we're incentivized to do something new all the time because of patents and IP. Right. So that's what you can make money on. But there's actually many existing proven drugs and IP that sit in like old patent databases that could be used here and just repurposed. So I'm a fan of repurposing. So that's something that the company Unlimited Bio did with the VGF therapy, right? And also many circles follistatin gene therapy, they're building on sort of methods to deliver the genetic material into the human body that has a track record and has been proven for several decades, right? So I think that is the right way to think about it. See it kind of as this platform to get these kind of things faster to a big market. It's very close to the United States. There's direct flights from 6 major US destinations, 2.5 hours from Miami, from Dallas, from Houston. I would still make an argument around efficacy trials. I think we should do them very differently. I think efficacy trials in general should not be a central pre-market mandate, right? It should not be required for market approval. Let's put it this way, right? So there's nothing wrong with taking a safe drug, even though it's not effective, right? There's lots of like supplements out there. There's lots of like, health gurus out there. There's lots of things.
Yeah, that's where the arguments are coming from today. Is like even on the supplement side of it, you have a bunch of doctors saying like you should never take a supplement. You don't know where they're made. You don't know what that molecule can do in your body, because big pharma are behind to push for other chemical. But I mean, like this is where our world today is clashing with those, like the fragmentation is coming really from two polarized ideas and concept. One is like, I need to sell you a pill that fix a problem. On the other side, I need to sell you, the supplement companies, I need to sell you product molecules that will avoid you to be sick. How do you see your project, your concept in the future jungling in between those two worlds, because both have to be reunified one day or the other? It cannot be a clash and say like we're separating the two systems and one you buy from one or you buy from the other one, and have a segregation of advices and opinion and medication as well. So how will you at Vitalia make sure that people live in harmony and have access to everything? It can be good on both sides, actually.
Yeah. It's a very good question. I'm hesitating to give a definitive answer. I'm actually trying to be a bit agnostic on that, right? I simply think the problem is we're moving too slow and there's too many restrictions, and that actually makes things in many ways less safe, right? So it's actually, for many companies, pharma companies, have limited to no liability for products that have been approved. Right? So, and that does not automatically mean they're safe. It's just there's very good reasons to believe they're safe. And often, there's also been bad drugs that have been approved. And sometimes it's, we just don't know all the time. And that's not good, right? So this way, you don't have an incentive to continue finding the truth and get like more granular on certain use cases. At that point, you just give it to the population, you sell, you make a lot of money. That's not good, and it's not safe, right? So the way I'm thinking about it is, how can we do things faster while safer and while more effective, right? And the mechanisms and the processes to ensure that. And I think there is in general lots of things that need to be very different when it comes to delivering healthcare, not only in like the drug development or innovation side, but also with things like insurance, right? So, for example, right now, your doctor, the incentive is to keep you sick, right, and sort of make a lot of money with end of life care, right? So, a very interesting scholar by the name of Robin Hanson once proposed, why don't we set the doctors up for different kinds of incentives, or the healthcare providers? Why don't we have a bundle where you get life insurance and healthcare from the same organization? Right, because this way, they have to pay for life years lost.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
so
true.
this way they actually
Yeah,
have an incentive to keep you
because
healthy. So these are the kind of
yeah,
things that we need to really know what works, right? Because right now, there's very strong reasons to believe that taking more drugs or therapies or get a surgery or whatever on average makes you worse. Right?
yeah,
And because of what I mentioned around liability, we don't know which half is the good one, which half is the bad one. So, but when you have an organization that's truly incentivized to make you healthy, they would do more rigorous research, right? Because they're
true.
incentivized to do so. Otherwise, they
Yeah,
would have to pay.
yeah.
So that's the kind of world that I would like to see. And I think then we have a much more precise understanding of what really makes people healthier and live longer, and sort of develop mechanisms to scale the delivery of these solutions.
Beautiful. I like that approach. Clever, uh, actually brilliant. Great approach. Thank you for that. Do you consider yourself as a biohacker?
Personally, to be honest, not so much.
Okay,
The
tell me.
reason is I never had very strong health problems, so nothing really pushed or
Me
tipped me over
neither.
the edge. No, and I was always a bit like weirded out by things were done in Germany, where I grew up, and even more in the United States. Everything was so expensive and this and that, right? So I just tried to avoid it as much as I can. And then I was really surprised how good healthcare was in Mexico,
Hmm.
right? So they had really modern clinics. It was pay out of pocket, and um, what really inspired me was they took my data before and after an intervention. Right, this is how it should be. That should be the standard, like after like a physiotherapy thing.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things that I'm very attracted to in the abstract, but right now for myself, I don't do it that much, right? I don't have health problems right now that I'm working on. Of course, like everyone, I kind of want to, do more and be even healthier, whatever, whatever. Um, but I think there's something important to be said around. It's not only bad to only fix things when they're broken,
Right.
right? There is something to be said for, preventing things early or whatever, whatever. But you need to like maintain a very high level of discipline.
Hmm.
And we have relatively, on average, our personalities have limited amount of self-discipline. There are people who are super self-disciplined, others less so. And you have kind of a contingent you can invest in. So you just need to be prepared to do that continuously over the entire rest of your life. Otherwise, it won't have much effect. So right now, where I'm investing most of my self-discipline in is building a company. I'll probably at some point reach a point where I think I'm over allocating for this and it's stressful and whatever, whatever. Then I'll probably allocate much more time to optimizing my health. But I feel like in the state where I'm at right now, I'm very, very allocated to building the company.
So you don't take any supplement, nothing.
No, like I've
No.
really actually been for most of my life avoiding as much as I can, which I think was also a good idea. I've been sick twice in the last 19 years.
Yeah.
Right. So in my household, there's always this new nutritional
Yeah.
advice, and it just changed all the time. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't, I don't believe any of it.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, there are some things that over time you learn. Of course, you should do this. You should especially do less of the bad things. So you're used to smoke. I'm not anymore. Drinking way less alcohol, way less sugar. So and cutting red meat from my diet and things like that. So which some people are probably pro and might sort
Yeah.
of
Well,
cringe me saying that,
yeah.
but
Well, no diet is sustainable anyway. Uh,
yeah.
how long do you think you're going to live?
Well, I'm doing this so we can succeed at making longevity, escape, velocity a reality, right? So, and I
You
think if
are a
we,
believer in the longevity escape.
yes, I would say so. And let me qualify that. I think about the world very much in bets and in probabilistic terms, right? So I believe just from sort of knowing smart people who've done a lot of the science, there's a very realistic chance, or I find it credible, that it's possible to solve within our lifetime. Right? And even if I give that only like a 15 or 20% chance, that would, just by the calculus of how much you'd gain, probably be the most important mission you'd work on in your life. So that's right there. And I think, what we're doing right now is sort of changing the regulatory paradigm. I think is the only way that it could work. Right. So I think, and that's kind of a bit of my critique of the longevity world, which is born a bit out of necessity, but there's this idea, we need to get the science right and get funding to make progress. And I'm like, no, you need to make progress to get the funding, right? And then you
Correct.
kind of gain
Yeah.
momentum to get the science right.
Right.
So that's kind of the very differentiated sort of thesis I have on the world. So if we want to have a chance of succeeding, and it's absolutely and definitely is my life's mission, that we need to really accelerate and see how far we can get.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm a believer in science and technology for extending lives. We are designed to live up to 130. We don't live that long because our society doesn't allow us to. So we first have to get that gap solved. That these 40 years that we're not getting, and trying to get them. And then if we can go further, probably technology will play a big role into it by printing organs or changing organs, because you can do whatever you want. You're going to need to one point to update the system in your body. So to conclude, it's fascinating what you're doing. What are the next step of Vitalia project in general? What is the upcoming years for you? What is crucial in this year and the upcoming months, and where are we going with this fascinating project?
So I'd like to invite your readers and listeners to join us on this mission. So as I mentioned, the island of Roatan is quite accessible. There's two major upcoming events. If you're coming more from the crypto side, I would recommend to already join us October 19 to November 19 for the Crypto Cities Builders Month, where we sort of develop the financial tools to fund science in decentralized ways, much of like the tech stack to run a city and run an economy here. And then we have another pop-up city, sort of the mega event from last time, in January and February. And
Yeah,
if
I'll
you're a
be there.
biotech startup, you should definitely join or extend to March as well. This information, I think, is fairly new by the release of this magazine or this podcast episode. So if you hear this, you should definitely apply for it early, as we take applications by timestamp.
Okay, perfect. And you can find more information on vitalia.city, correct?
Exactly.
Niklas, you are fascinating. I loved this conversation, very high level, very deep into the future of what humanity is going to be, and the economy, the economic world is probably going to turn to in the future. I hope so. Dreamers are becoming achievers, and then turn into like new disruptive way of making things happening. You are one of them. Thank you. Congratulations for this project. We are supporting you 100%. I appreciate your time and your deep insights.
I'm only standing on the shoulders of giants, of what happened before me and what others have built, and try to take it even further. And I really appreciate having me on this podcast and presenting this to your audience. Very excited to have you and many of your listeners and readers hopefully be involved and be part of this as well.
Absolutely. Count on us.